So we're talking about how Basil came to Hallows in a relatively young age as opposed to going to a local seminary. And so why don't you continue the story?
Yes, well, I was offered to go I came from Cork, and the priest in charge of the school where I was, the college where I was, gave me the opportunity to join the Cork diocese. But this acquaintance of mine had, whom I knew very well, had already gone through the course in All Hallows, and he was already ordained, but he went off to San Antonio. So I sort of took a notion to come to All Hallows. I knew that the moment I took that decision, it would be outside of Ireland, which I didn't stick in mind. In fact, I thought there were so many priests in Ireland that there wasn't much opportunity. There wasn't a whole lot of incentive to be an Irish priest. Yeah. But the idea of All Hallows supplying priests to needy dioceses I rather liked.
So, US was a mission then, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, it is a missionary college.
Yeah.
It was founded for that very purpose. And so, as I told you already, I wasn't long in the college when the rector said to me, there's a Scottish bishop here who would like to talk to you with you from joining his diocese. So he and another young man would also come at the same time. We were interviewed by the bishop, and I presume he liked us and we liked him. So we signed on for my diocese in Scotland, Dunkeld. Okay. Didn't know where Dunkeld was. We came back to the student bodies, we went to Dunkeld, and somebody said, some bright spark said it was a fishing village. But that's all we do, and this was the spirit of the college. You really committed yourself to for life to these dioceses, and you had no idea what it was like, or what the bishop was like, or what the priests were like, or anything. But it was a real act of faith. But that was the spirit of the college. Right. The idea was to go to dioceses where there was a need. That was why Father Hand had founded it in the first place. Right. And strangely enough, a good 100 years after he had founded the college, this is 1950, he had founded the college in 1842, that spirit still pertained, that the idea was to go to some diocese where you were needed, and of course to the local bishops who would decide whether they wanted priests from Ireland or not. So they would either write letters, and in my case the bishop came across from Scotland to the rector here, and he actually interviewed us personally. But that was from that moment onwards I was committed to going to the Diocese of Dunkeld. Well, they were great support, and saved money from day one to keep me in pocket money, but they didn't have to pay for the
education.
They didn't have to pay for my stay in All Hallows, but they had to pay for everything else: books, clothes, pocket money, that sort of thing. So it was quite a sacrifice, and I wouldn't have been able to do it without the support of my family. And I think that was common to many students here, that they were really, the families made great sacrifices to keep them with the young man of 18. If you went through the whole course and ordained in 6 years later, well, it was a lot of money over the 6 years.
Were you from a big family?
I was, number 9.
Number 9? Mm-hmm. Big family. Somebody else I talked to was 9.
Yeah, I was number 9.
So there were sacrifices already, and just
straight away they had to save money, and they all kind of chipped in a little bit at a time. But of course their wages wasn't great either. But they all sort of rallied around, and clothes, pocket money, that sort of thing.
There was always talk.
Books as well.
There's always talk at the Vincentian colleges, the universities that I'm aware of, the one I worked at, actually, and the one in the Philippines I've done some work for, about Vincentian values and the spirit of St. Vincent de Paul. Can you tell a little bit about your sense of that as you were here and being in your training?
Well, we weren't consciously disciples of St. Vincent de Paul. The staff were Vincentians. Right. And I think it's true that their ideal was Father Hand more than St. Vincent de Paul, that sort of took up his ideals. But in fact, it was a wonderful experience that the staff, the very people who sort of taught us and ran the college, had the same rules as we had. When we were in our rooms, they were in their rooms. They got up when we got up.
Yeah.
They ate when we ate. So they lived the same kind of life as we did, which was very, I suppose, encouraging and very impressive. I must say, I'm very impressed with the spirituality of the staff here. They were very dedicated. They wanted us to be good priests.
Yeah.
No nonsense about it. You weren't going to Dunkeld to set our diocese to set the world on fire. You weren't meant to be great bishops or monsignors. That wasn't the purpose of it. The purpose was to help the church in whatever diocese you went to. And they were very spiritual men. All my life I've been grateful to the staff who were here at that time. I was very impressed with them, and they still influence me, of course, as they do when you're young.
Well, I think that sense of missionary purpose is very Vincentian, in that sense of going out to not just spread the word of the gospel, but almost equally important is to service people, support people in need. I would assume if it's a fishing village that you were going to, it was a poor village, and you served the needs of the people there, not just spiritually, but I think probably in terms of many other ways. So I'm wondering if that, as you were going through your education here, was that service to others, and particularly those that are poor and marginalized, was that a sense of what you were educated around?
Yeah, I think so. By the way, I have to correct that fishing village idea. It wasn't a fishing village at all.
Oh, it wasn't?
No, this was a wrong impression somebody had.
Oh, okay.
As I said, we didn't know what place it was.
Okay.
Some big cities and substantial towns in the east coast of Scotland, north of Edinburgh, and to a beautiful diocese. And there were fishing villages, but that's not where we were placed.
Okay.
No, I think what we got from the spirit of the college, which I think the Vincentian fathers who ran it were very keen to keep the traditions of Father Hammond alive, as a missionary college. I think spirituality, be good priests, holy priests. No indication that you were going to be a wonderful administrator or senior man in the diocese. But you were taught to say your prayers, be holy. Holiness was what it's all about. Every act of the day, from the time you got up to the time you went to bed, here in the 6 years, was all about being holy, pleasing to God. And you were trained to be a good priest, whatever diocese you went to. Obey the bishop, whom you had never seen in your life, but you were expected. That's what you were trained to do, obey the bishop. This is pre-Vatican II, of course, and it was perhaps easier to do it then than maybe later on, more difficult. We were trained to obey the bishop, to serve the people, and to do it in as humble and prayerful a way as we could. But holiness of life was, I suppose, the linchpin of the...
And that stayed with you through your career and your life?
I must say. Every day of my life, I thank God I came from all Hallows. I'm sure other ceremonies are wonderful as well, but I'm always grateful. And I can see the training I got in when I preach and when I act in the parish, when I train altar service. I can almost hear the voice of the priest who taught us how to serve and how to say Mass. I still pass it on to the people of my parish. I can see them in me. I suppose it's natural.
Right. So many of the people I talked to and I experienced here who had gone to Hallows or have worked here talk about that lasting spirit, that lasting influence in their lives, their personal lives and their professional lives. So I think it's something that has continued on, maybe with different nuance or different elements to it as the college developed. Tell me a little bit about your sense as you watched the college go through various stages, from the transition from seminary to transition to third level, and from what I understand, you've stayed pretty involved, pretty aware of how the college has evolved. What are some of your feelings and thoughts on that?
We had a big celebration here, I think it's 1992, 93, where we were celebrating, must have been 92, celebrating 150 years of the college existence. When Mary Robertson, the president, came. And we were aware then that it has ceased to be a seminary, that this was in many ways the last hurrah. We had 400 or 500 priests from the college, back from all over the world at a big celebration. The president was here and all that. And I think we were all aware that the seminary days were over. And then the Vincentians changed tack, so to speak, to modernise it. And we're all in favour of that, because if they could keep the spirit of the college going and still serve the church as the college was intended to do, so much the better. But we realised that it was a difficult thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Do your experiences since then with coming back and maybe talking with students or talking with staff, or just what you encounter as you come back for various events, are you still seeing much of that same spirit?
Absolutely. I think the present staff would be very much in the tradition of the Vincentian fathers who ran it when it was seminary. The idea of service, the idea of going out and helping people, and whatever sort of training courses they made. I'm not aware, of course, of the individual courses that they did here. I just knew from afar, but I could see that they were trying very hard to keep the tradition of the college going. And if that was the case, so much the better.
Yeah. Certainly the financial realities have continued on. It's nothing recent. There was many of the financial challenges have been challenges for many years, and I think Jim Lillis, who was just in here, was on the governors and was very much involved in the finance committee. But it's interesting for me to hear the stories of those who have been here in management over the period of time, about the balance that they dealt with in terms of sustaining the college and the values and the impact on those that students and all that were involved, but at the same time struggling with the finances. And you talk about the staff at the time you were here. There's been a remarkable staff over the years.
Yes, and they all gave themselves for nothing, just our keep.
Yeah.
And as I said, it was a hard life. To no holiday camp when we were here for 6 years. Rules and regulations all over the place. Silence was very much a part of the training, I think. But we were always aware that the staff had the same kind of life that we had, so they weren't imposing something on us that they didn't practice themselves. And they were very holy men, very dedicated, and their aim in life was to turn out what we would call good priests.
Good holy priests. Yeah.
And for 6 years you got that kind of training, so it's bound to leave a mark. And of course they are the rules and the regulations, the difficulties that they were here was also a way of weeding out. Unless you genuinely wanted to be a priest, you wouldn't have stayed here very long. You would have opted for some other career. You wouldn't have stayed very long here, because it was hard. You got up from the time you got up to the time you went to bed. It was full of rules and regulations, but we accepted it. We didn't find it difficult. We just had to obey the rules. We were always aware that it was helping us to prepare for our future careers as priests.
What role do you see the passmen playing in continuing the legacy of the college and the educational experience that people have had?
Well, I would hope they would help as much as they can. But of course, the passmen are getting old now. They're not as young as they used to be. Because I don't know when the last priest was ordained here, but as far as numbers were concerned, I think the numbers petered out. The substantial numbers petered out. Must have been around before 1980. When I was here, we had well over 200 young men here, which of course was a great experience, because, for example, the singing, the church music that we had every Sunday morning, we had high mass in the chapel with all the full liturgy of those days, pre-Vatican II chants and Gregorian chants, and we had a priest in charge of the staff who was very meticulous that we actually sang it properly.
Yeah.
So and we also went through the liturgical year with the motets and the arias that would be appropriate set to Advent and Christmas and Holy Week. If you do that every Sunday for 6 years, you remember them.
Yeah.
And to this day, I'm familiar with all the wonderful traditional church music that has so enriched the church. And today we'll continue to enrich. Yeah. We got 200 young men singing it every Sunday, so that was great training. You don't have to get 200 young men doing it now, but we experienced that.
Have you been to the corridor down there?
I have, yes.
Yeah. Touch anything for you? Does it cause you to reflect on anything different than we've already talked about in terms of your formation and your education here?
Well, it just brought back memories of the rules and the regulations. I mean, we weren't allowed to talk. That was called the silent corridor.
Okay.
Before you went to the church, you weren't allowed to talk in the silent corridor. I don't know in the church, but in the silent corridor. And we would queue up on a Sunday morning with our soutanes and surplices and our music books. I forget what they were called, but it wasn't the breviary, but it was it had the church music, mass music, and we would queue up there and process into the church and have a whole high mass. So that was called the silent corridor. But of course, all the corridors were silent. You weren't allowed to talk. You weren't allowed to talk unless during recreation, really. Yeah. And the moment you put your foot in the stairs to go upstairs, that was silence as well. Yeah. Total silence up in the corridors and bedrooms and that sort of thing. So silence was the big thing.
You think it reflects well the legacy of the college and respects the pastmen who are so important to the college?
So I have to say that every day of my life I'm grateful to all Hallows for the training I got. Yeah. And the difficulties you faced in life afterwards as a priest, the bad things and the good things, the training would stand to you. Yeah. We were trained to obey the bishop. Not if he told you to do something wrong, but obey the bishop in general, obey the church, support the church. And we were the generation that within a few short years of our ordination in 1956 had to face the Vatican II revolution.
That's right.
But the kind of intellectual training we got here enabled us, I think for the most part, to cope with that. It didn't actually affect my faith in a bad way. I used to read about, in the 60s and 70s, read about some priests had an identity crisis. I didn't know what they were talking about, because the identity I got was All Hallows, and that stood me all my days. I didn't know what an identity crisis was, even though they were all talking about it at the time.
It's interesting you raise that, because we've went through that era as well, and I think we saw a mix of priests' reaction to it, and laity too, of either anger or excitement, everything in between. And you say your experience here, which you taught here, helped you or prepared you for it. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Well, as I say, they wanted to be holy. They wanted to be loyal to the church. No question of them fighting for the bishop or the pope or anything. But you obeyed the church authorities. But at the same time, the intellectual formation we got did make us open to change, and I welcomed the reforms of Vatican II. Okay. That, insofar as they came to me, and they didn't cause me any problem at all. I was one of those that were pleased, even though ordained in 1956. 1966 was the full flow of the Vatican Council, and then the reforms began to come in late 60s, 70s. Didn't cause me any trouble. Yeah.
Would you say that same formation and all is still true of what we're experiencing with Pope Francis?
I would think so, yes.
I hear some of the same grumbling, but not so much. But many of us have great excitement about it. I'm just curious if that that formation
Yeah.
continue to
Well, I think
impact you.
yeah, loyalty to the church. You
Yeah.
obey the church.
Loyalty.
As long as they didn't
Yeah.
tell you to do anything wrong. But change of itself didn't affect us badly.
Yeah. Prepared you for change.
Yeah, and we had this intellectual approach that we,
Yeah.
I can't put my finger on it, but we were quite. I was quite happy with
Yeah.
the changes. The kind of there was a bit of that modern beginning to seep in even in the 50s.
Yeah.
I think perhaps it was signs of things to come. But we were.
Yeah.
I personally didn't have any problem whatsoever with the change that did come about.
Good. Well, we're out of time, but I certainly greatly appreciate you taking
Well,
the
thank
time.
you very much.
Is there any last thoughts you've got for us? Or something?
Just I'm eternally grateful to
Yeah.
all Hallows for the training I got, and I thank God every day for it.
Yeah.
And I'm aware of the fact that I'm an All Hallows priest every day as well.
That's great. Yeah. Well, it's that next. I keep referring it. It's like Irish Wakes in Chicago. It's a lot of sadness and a sense of loss, but there's what the staff is doing now, the sense of celebration and and all, bringing people together to celebrate.
That's
it's
right,
just
that's
so important. Yeah.
That's right. And life is life. Ups and downs.
Yeah. So, anyways, good to
Well,
meet
thank
you.
you very much for
Yeah.
being so patient.
Oh,
Thank you. I hope it
enjoyed it.
was satisfactory.